Welcome to TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast, where we discuss issues that affect the visitor economy with subject matter experts representing private businesses, sector associations, destination management organizations, post-secondary institutions, all levels of government, and other stakeholders. I'm Walt Judas, CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of British Columbia, an advocacy organization that works on behalf of its members to influence government policy and direction. My guest is Brett Soberg, co-owner and head captain of Eagle Wing Whale Watching and Wildlife Tours. Welcome, Brett. Thank you for joining me on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast.
My pleasure. Very excited to have a chat.
So I'd like to begin by asking you about your journey. So let me start with where you grew up and where you were educated and what were you educated in?
Sure. Well, I'm one of those very fortunate born and raised local boys, being brought up in Victoria on Vancouver Island. My father was an educator. My mother was an artist, self-taught. So I grew up in a very creative, well-educated household, being exposed to all sorts of wonderful things growing up, including nature and going camping during the summer, etc. In terms of education, I went straight out of high school, becoming a world famous artist. I went to Emily Carr College of Art and Design in Vancouver on Granville Island and had an absolutely amazing, life-altering experience. It was quite an intense program, but learned a lot. Came crawling home after a year, kind of got my bearings, got a job at a hotel, Accent Inns, for 2 years there while going to Camosun College to get some credited courses to transfer to the University of Victoria, where I then transferred into their second year visual arts art history program. I completed that year. At that point in time, life was shifting a little bit. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been married 31 years now and still together with 3 beautiful children. So I had some young mouths to feed, so got right into the workforce and kind of sowed my oats in the hotel hospitality industry. I got a job at the Delta Ocean Point Resort Hotel and Spa in Victoria, and I worked there from about 95 to 2000. And yeah, then I kind of dabbled in the whale watching industry, and that's kind of a funny story how I got into that. Shall I continue?
Well, let me stop you there for one
Stop
second.
there.
We do have
Sounds
a
good.
couple of things in common, one being that we married our high school sweethearts. I'm a little ahead of you in that way. I think I've got 9 years of marriage on you, now encroaching on 40 years next year, but we also have 3 kids. So before you go on to talk about Eagle Wing and how you got into whale watching, what was that life-altering experience that you referenced going to Emily Carr, and what did you originally intend to be? Was it kind of following in the footsteps of your mother, or?
I just really enjoyed the creative process, and I was exposed to all the different disciplines. So printmaking, color theory, sculpture, photography, drawing, creative process. Yeah, Emily Carr for me was just one of those life experiences, fresh out of high school, young lad, being protected with the home environment, and living in a different city, straight out of high school. And the program was very, very intense. Long days, long hours, 6, 7 days a week. Never had experienced that before, but I loved it. I immersed myself in it. So for me, that was, I had good work ethic, having had a couple of jobs, and then of course playing sports all my life. Hard work was not new to me, but I was fascinated. I learned a lot. Met a lot of really good people. The dean of the school, we became friends, and he was encouraging me to go to Wales in the UK to art college, but the cost was cost prohibitive, so didn't really walk down that path. But yes, my intention was to be creative minded, be an artist, a designer of some description, follow in sort of my mom's footsteps, and that was my experience at Emily Carr.
And why did you decide not to pursue that?
Well, I continued the visual arts, fine arts side with art history, and I thought, well, maybe I could become an educator. which is why I went to Camosun College to get those accredited courses, which would allow me to transfer into the University of Victoria locally. And then, of course, went into the second year visual arts and art history program. So I was going to major and minor. And then my thought process was to complete that program and become an educator, was the
Hmm.
plan. But of course, that plan changed.
Quite a diversion. Did living in Victoria, though, have some influence on your desire to be on the water as a career? How did it? How did things transpire to the point where you got into whale watching and ultimately being a co-owner of Eagle Wings?
Well, up until my experience at the Ocean Point Resort, my exposure to water was through my grandfather, fishing and crabbing, and my father fishing, and just being immersed in nature, going into old growth forest and Goldstream Park and seeing the salmon spawns. At my time at the Delta Ocean Point Resort Hotel and Spa in Victoria, of course, you have people in various attractions in Victoria coming around soliciting their, hey, we're really good at this and come try this. And this fellow named Jeff, who's now a really dear friend, was promoting whale watching. So he kept on trying to encourage me to come out and try whale watching. It's fabulous, and promote our product. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Meanwhile, I'm checking in 250 rooms and checking out 250 rooms. So it was busy. I brushed him off a few times. And then finally I bit the bullet and said, listen, what's it going to take for you to not come in here during peak times and try to promote your product? So I went out, and he was with another company in town. And so I went out whale watching for the first time in my life in a Zodiac with a gentleman with a biology degree, with a lovely personality and a great sense of humor. And I was absolutely hooked. After the trip, I said, give me a list, man. What have I got to do what you're doing right now? I was just so blown away by just the experience on the water, the thrill of the boat ride, but more importantly, the narration, the storytelling, the information that was shared, getting to know the animals very personally. And so that really just kind of floored me. And that was the beginning of where we are right now, almost 30 years later in this industry. So I started to work part-time for that particular, well, first I went out and volunteered my time to get the experience. I think I probably did about 20 or 30 trips on my own time to get to know the operation, how to handle the boats, etc. And then they hired me part-time. So I did that for 2 years, part-time whale watching during the summer, maintaining a full-time position at the hotel. And then that segued in 1999 to full-time seasonal whale watching, and I left the hotel. That's when I took that leap of faith.
And what kind of training did you need to ultimately be the lead captain on boats? And there must have been a long period of time where you were gaining some of that training and whatever licensing is required.
For sure. Well, my current position as sort of co-general manager and lead captain and spinning many different hats at Eagle Wing Tours was definitely a process. So the company that I worked for in the beginning was Sea Fun Safaris. They're unfortunately no longer in the industry, but they were a great operation. They were a family operation. That's where I cut my teeth in that industry. Learned all about the boats, all about nature, the wildlife, became a very well-versed mariner with a 12-passenger vessel, a Zodiac style craft. And then, life started to change in 2004. The writing was on the wall. There maybe was an opportunity for me to grow as quickly as I would like in that particular operation. One thing led to another. A gentleman who was in the industry with another company called Eagle Wing Tours approached me and said, hey, would you like to go off and build a boat? And was sort of that transition from working at a very wonderful operation, no regrets, fantastic people, fantastic operation, quality product, had a great time, but I had 3 young mouths to feed. So it was really a decision that was made. If I'm going to stay in this industry, I have to see a future. And so Eagle Wing Tours was that option. In 2005, I was brought on as a partner. We built a boat. Another gentleman was brought in, Don Stewart, who is my now business partner, who I would really like to elevate here, if I may take a moment. The reason why Eagle Wing Tours today is successful is because the partnership that I have with Don Stewart, who is also a born and raised local boy, and our respective families and our wives and our supportive children is why we're here. And then by extension, the people who work at Eagle Wing are Eagle Wing. Otherwise, it's just a name. So we've been very, very fortunate to cross paths at the right time, at the right moments. And the synergy between us is really quite fantastic. It's an excellent business relationship. So he was brought in 2005. So there were three of us, the original owner of Eagle Wing Tours, myself and Don. And in very short order, building this boat, and over the course of 3 years, it became quite obvious that unfortunately, it wasn't a three-way synergistic relationship. So, the original owner, bless his heart, lovely man, big heart. But when it came to creative process and business and strategy, he wasn't necessarily as open to other ideas. So the writing was on the wall. We were deep in a hole. We had to get ourselves out of this. And we're both born in February. Don and I were Aquarians. We joke that failure is not an option. So it was like, we got to do this. So respectfully, we asked the other owner to part ways, and then it just became the two of us. And then, of course, from 2005 through to 2025, we've had every year sequentially is the best next year, with the exception of 2020 and 2021 because of COVID.
What kind of boat did you build?
We built a Big Brother version of the Wellcraft Scarab style that was original to Eagle Wing Tours, which was a 38-foot, 12-passenger fiberglass monohull. I often relate it to the Miami Vice style boat. And for those of you that are listening, if you're old enough, you'll know what I just said. For those of you that are not, you can Google it. So Goldwing was the big brother to that vessel, which became 60 feet and 26 passengers. So that allowed us to expand into a very different market. And it was a very unique product in an industry that was very used to floating rubber rib boats or older vessels that were converted, that were covered in nature. So we were sort of creating and carving our own little niche market in a very competitive space.
So actually building a boat and then learning how to pilot them and working on the various certifications that you need must have really prepared you for the last couple of decades working in the whale watching sector.
The key to our success has been being open to learning as you go, and make lots of mistakes and learn from them and don't repeat them. And when you surround yourself with really good people who are not only modest but very intelligent, you surround yourself with people that are skilled in the right areas at the right time. And Don, my business partner, again, was very mechanically minded. He just knew that side of the business where I knew nothing. I couldn't part a remote control car and put it back together again if you asked me to. Now, you ask me to pull the top of a 800 horsepower diesel engine and put it back on, I could probably wrap my head around it. It is a very complex industry to be in. There are so many different layers to it, which makes it exciting, but also intimidating at the same time.
So I want to get back to that when we talk about issues, but tell me about Eagle Wing. You talked about the progression of you into whale watching and into this sector, and really how you and Don took over the company. But tell me about Eagle Wing. You do whale watching, wildlife tours. What's the size of your operation? Where are you primarily located? How many boats do you have? Those types of things.
Certainly. Well, in 2005, we were a 12-passenger single vessel, 36-seat capacity daily, to now about 510 seats daily.
Wow.
So from one vessel to 5 vessels in a 20-year period. And in terms of the operation, by 2005, I already had a really good idea what the industry was all about. And so where the opportunity lied in terms of kind of creating something unique and special, i.e. Eagle Wing, with the boutique whale watching option that we were offering. Quality product, get what you pay for. But then there's that environmental aspect too, which really was under leveraged, not being spoken about, kind of the elephant in the room. And for me and Don, it was really important to sort of craft or recreate what we felt the model whale watching operator looked like. And we started that process in 2008, 2009. So once three owners became two, we were able to make some of those operational decisions. So we committed to understanding sort of who we were and what our footprint was on the environment, and became carbon neutral in 2009. And as far as I know, we were the first whale watching operator in North America to become carbon neutral, to sort of understand what our footprint or our potential, ASR or emission impact was. And then in 2011, we continued to recreate sort of what we wanted to do and became members of 1% for the Planet, where we commit to donate 1% of our gross revenue every year into a bunch of really amazing nonprofit environmental organizations within the boundaries of the Salish Sea. And in 2013, we were the first to offer a conservation or a wildlife fee, which has grown into something pretty special. And what's really cool is that a lot of these decisions that we've made over the years, others in the competitive space we call whale watching, there are 30 operators between Seattle, Vancouver, and Victoria, and Southern Vancouver Island. A lot of decisions that they're making now are decisions because we sort of broke the ground or cut our teeth by making those choices. It's been fun.
What are those environmental initiatives that you're alluding to?
Certainly. Well, currently we financially support about 25 different organizations. And each of those organizations fall under the umbrella we call our 4 pillars. And our 4 pillars operationally in our company are what we filter any and or every operational decision through. So conservation, sustainability, education, and research. And by extension, when you layer that into 25 organizations, it ranges from education programs, our floating classroom project, which I can talk more about. It talks about salmon enhancement projects, hatchery projects, preserving areas like Race Rocks Reserve. We replaced their desalination system. We help them upgrade their solar panels for their diesel generator power supply system. A salmon enhancement project in Souk Harbor. We support researchers, humpback whale researchers, orca researchers, Seneca research. It's a very long list. So, and we use the boundary of the Salish Sea, which is a very beautiful and wonderful geographic region from sort of northern Vancouver Island down to Seattle and out to the west coast of Tofino, to sort of frame who we want to support so that it becomes local to the region, relevant to the whales and wildlife that we see, which by extension translates into a lot of our narration and storytelling for our guests' experience. So it has a really powerful trickle down the hill effect.
So what is the floating classroom that you referenced?
Oh, that's such a passion project. The Sea Fun Safari, as I mentioned, hey, there's an opportunity. We should get into schools and kids and talk to them and get them excited about barnacles and humpback whales because they're cool too. And they just did not have the bandwidth, unfortunately. And so at Eagling Tours, once we got into a rhythm operationally from a business level and wrapping our head around what that sort of environmentally responsible model of a whale watching company looks like, in 2016, my apologies, started to connect with people who I knew. And Aaron Maxwell is a wonderful fellow who is in the Victoria School District. I went to school with him and his brother and his dad, Tom Maxwell, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But in spirit, he worked with us for 10 years. So there was some really cool synergy going on. So he and I sort of started that process about crafting this program. Basically, what we now have today is an international award-winning floating classroom project where we have a 4-part program. We have a fabulous, passionate education team. They go into the class for about an hour and a half with the kids. They talk about the values of the Salish Sea and why it's important to care about the Salish Sea and everything in it. A week later, they come on the boat for 2 hours. We give them a new hairdo. They smell a seal. They taste kelp. And it's not about the whales. That's a very, very important piece. It's just all about fostering that emotional connection to the ocean and why it is important and relevant to everybody who lives on the planet today. The ocean, at the end of the day, is the lifeblood of our planet.
The third session, which is a week later, is a variety of different things. It could be going to a beach, doing a plankton tow, looking at things under the microscope, going to the museum. And then there's a fourth piece where we ask them to create something. So from this wonderful experiential learning experience, they are using their creative juices to share and articulate their knowledge in art. And it's a real humbling process. You know, when you've got a grade 4 student talking about colonialism and what that impact was to Indigenous communities, it gives you goosebumps. And they are confidently articulating their knowledge about what they've learned to you. It is really impressive.
What a privilege that is. And I'll tell you, I wished I had that experience when I was in elementary school. Sounds terrific. Are you a 12-month of the year operation?
We run all year except Christmas.
Yeah. And so you have a chance then throughout the school year, especially now when it's a bit slower and the peak season is behind us, to be able to work with kids. And that certainly helps sustain your operation 12 months of the year.
And that most certainly was a positive byproduct. Not only is the program good for all the right reasons for the kids and get them plugged into their sense of place, but at the end of the day, in a very seasonal industry in tourism in Victoria in the marine sector, to keep really fantastic people employed year round is a challenge. And this program has allowed us to keep 8 or 9 additional people on a year round contract from October through till March. So that has worked out really, really well. And they're just so plugged in and dialed into these kids. It's just crazy. It's super awesome to see.
You alluded to award-winning this floating classroom program, but you've won a lot of awards. Tell me about some of those.
Oh, we've been very fortunate, making choices for the right reasons, not because it's a positive return on investment. That ultimately is the positive byproduct of making the right choices, in our very humble opinion. And that is very not business 101. It's contrary to maybe, it's just a different frame of mind. And along the way, we've been very blessed to acquire various accolades. We have been awarded the top sustainable tourism business in Canada 3 times in 2014, 16, and 2022. We have won a Community Impact Award at the TIABC event and conference last year. The National Marine Educators Association blessed us with a top outstanding educational program for the education program back in, I believe it was 2023, and there are many others, and those are sort of the cream on the top. And when you share that with your team, it's just kind of that cherry to reinforce that, yeah, we're pretty good at what we do and we're having a good time. We should just keep on pushing.
My guest on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast is Brett Soberg, co-owner and head captain of Eagle Wing Whale Watching and Wildlife Tours. Brett is in the office at Fisherman's Wharf in Victoria. We certainly welcome the opportunity to speak with you, because one thing you didn't reference earlier, and I didn't raise it until now, is that you live off-grid. Do you live on an island, and why did you choose that?
Personally, I've been drawn to, well, just nature in general, and just sort of at that stage in life, my wife and I have had some things happen in the last, 5 years. Health-wise, it offers instant perspective, and so just kind of diving into it and making some decisions. A year ago, we bought a beautiful, beautiful property on the Cook-Sila River, just west of Shawnigan Lake. And it is in the middle of nowhere. Our closest neighbor is 1 kilometer away, and the property has a 100-year history. And there is a hydroelectric dam system. So we pull our water from a dam via a creek down a pipeline, 1,400 feet long, 230 feet of elevation. It goes into a generator room. It spins a Pelton wheel, which spins a generator, which generates electricity. And our water diverts off the same system too, where we UV it and filter it. And it's just so cool. Loving, no regrets, loving every day.
Yeah, there must be a lot of learning in that, though, too.
There's a learning curve, but because of the experience in the whale watching industry, playing with machinery and engineering systems, I had a certain level of comfort diving into that particular situation. So it's been great.
So did you build a house there then?
There was a little cottage, and built in 1928, we think, and it was partially renovated from the previous owner. So we completed that renovation, and there's another home built in the 70s that is older and needing a little bit of TLC, and we might re-renovate that or build on the same foundation another home in a few years. We'll just see. We're playing it by ear. We're just enjoying the property right now.
And any of your kids live with you?
Two of my kids are there in trailers, fully serviced with septic systems and water and electricity, and they're enjoying life too. My daughter, who's my middle child, and my younger son. My older son is living with his wife in town. He's a full-timer, so yeah, it's great. Everybody comes up there and enjoys the property.
Yeah, sounds really cool. One day I'll endeavor to pay a visit. Check it out.
Absolutely, love to have you.
So I want to talk about issues, and there are plenty of them, particularly for small businesses these days in an economy that is more difficult, certainly rising costs, etc. But what are the primary issues that you face, particularly as an operator in the marine environment?
Well, the complexity of our industry all started at 100,000 feet. So we deal with wildlife, we deal with weather, we deal with regulatory bodies in Canada and the US because it's a trans-border industry. We deal with boats, the machinery and the equipment. And then, of course, you have the HR component that you layer into a marine industry. So there are a lot of things that layer into one another. And at different times of the year, there can be slightly elevated complexities for a bunch of reasons. But it's finding a rhythm and having a team in place to sort of drive those things forward. So if I distill down into the regulatory side, for example, the whale watching professional industry here or community between Seattle, Vancouver, and Victoria is one of the highest regulated industries in the world. Yeah, the industry is a great case study for a viable, healthy industry with appropriate regulations currently. And hopefully it'll be sustainable going into the long term. Without going down the rabbit hole of what regulations for when and what time of year and what decade, at the end of the day, regulations are valuable. We don't necessarily have to agree with them all. And that's where the bureaucracy and the politics jump in with respect to why a regulation exists. Many of us who have spent 25, 30,000 hours observing wildlife in their natural habitat will have an opinion. We will have expertise, and a lot of regulatory bodies will not necessarily have that same level of real-time on the water experience. So sometimes regulations can be driven by political or public pressure versus science or research, or erring on the side of being cautious. And it's sort of a blend of all those three things, which segues into one of the other challenges that our professional community faces, and that's public perception. There seems to be, a large group that are in favor of whale watching, and there's a group that is not in favor of whale watching. And then there's people sort of in the middle. And at the end of the day, when you're on the water, there's all sorts of complexities. There's visual compression, there's sea state. What people don't appreciate is the level of multitasking that goes into a captain at the helm of a craft with people's lives in their hand and the lives of the wildlife with various conditions. And the complexity and the multitasking that's involved in that, it is very, very misunderstood, which is unfortunate. So we often find ourselves on social media, bless its heart. It is very easy access. People like to speak freely, sometimes more freely than they probably would if they were standing in front of you. And that energy can be quite organic and persistent, which is unfortunate. And I do want to take a moment to recognize all of those people. They are passionate. They love the wildlife. They love their whales. And I am not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that their passion is misguided or inappropriate. It is appropriate. It's just a matter of channeling into solutions. And that's where I'm going to segue into a bit of frustration. There are a lot of great organizations in Canada, in BC on the coast in particular, who mean well again, but if we are being solution-based, i.e. help the southern resident killer whales, help the herring population, regenerate healthy habitat for the bait fish along the coast, we all know what the solutions are, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to food on the table for the southern resident killer whales. And that is all about healthy habitat. And talking about fish is an emotionally sensitive topic. It is a complex political topic. And solutions could be put on the table of politicians right now to save the southern resident killer whales and help the herring and help salmon stock, etc. And I am generalizing, so please take this with a grain of salt. But it's political will and it's money, because fish are expensive. And that's part of our frustration, because we see it, we know what the solutions are, and we don't see anything meaningful being done about it, except more regulations and talk about doing things and then things not happening. And that's frustrating, because for me, again, somebody who's been on the water for 28 years, watching all the animals you can possibly imagine, and up until 2017, viewed the southern resident killer whales, who I very much still consider to be an extension to my own family. I was able to identify every single animal, tell you who was who in the zoo, related to who, how they are, what their names were, quirky little anecdotal little personalities based on personal experience on the water. And in 2019, the government said, don't watch them. That was a hard pill to swallow. In 2017, operationally, Eagle Wing just chose to not actively watch the southern resident killer whales because we saw the writing on the wall. We have a very healthy Bigs population, and we have a very healthy humpback whale population, minke whales and gray whales. So the diversity of wildlife available to us to put together a meaningful experience for people was still there. So we left the southern resident killer whales alone. So where I'm going to get a little bit probably emotional here is that I feel government has mismanaged fisheries and other things on the coast here for far too long. I think they should be held accountable at some point in time to actually make a difference. I think there's an opportunity to bring some pretty wonderful people. Again, I'm going to refer to those passionate people of whales with various backgrounds, various thoughts and feelings and agendas and so on and so forth. Bring everybody into a room. We check our egos at the door. We find common ground and we fix it. We make it right. Government wants us to be pointing the finger at one another. Government wants us to be fractured. And that's where I'm frustrated with that. And I know by extension, the majority of the whale watching community feels that as well. And I'll stop there.
Boy, there's lots in there that I could unpack, but you've been on the water, or are on the water, much more than anyone. How would you assess the health of our marine environment, the southern killer whales, as you talked about? What are those misnomers and what are the solutions?
Well, again, at a very high level, we in the Salish Sea are blessed with one of the most nutrient-rich and biodiverse-rich regions in the world, next to the Amazon rainforest, and that's something to be proud of. But we have a responsibility to care for that as custodians, and we can learn from our the local indigenous cultures up and down the coast. I think personally, moving forward too as well. So, the real issues are prey availability. So we have 5 species of whale that call this area home at different times of the year. 4 of them are doing well. 1 is not. And that one is a genetically distinct ecotype of orca known as a southern resident killer whale who love eating fish, preferences salmon. And the difference between that one population who doesn't seem to be doing as well as the others, in my humble opinion, is the consistent availability of food over the course of a 12-month period. The key is consistency and the availability of the food. Understand that when those beautiful animals go through periods of nutritional stress, whether you've got females that are pregnant or not, males and females, their body metabolizes the fat, which is where toxic load is stored. That goes into their systems, doesn't make life any easier. There's a high mortality rate with newborn orca in the southern resident killer whale community. There's a high neonate or stillbirth rate in that community. There are other complexities as well that are going into why that reason is unhealthy. But the big one I feel is the consistency and availability of food over the course of a calendar year, because the other 4 types of whale have that available to them. They all live in the same environment. They're all exposed to all the things you could possibly come up with in a list right now in terms of boat traffic, different types of vessels, freighters, tankers, cruise ships, plane traffic, recreational fishers, toxic load, you name it. They're exposed to it all in the same environment. So that's the real problem. You can break that down further. Again, in my humble opinion, the Chinook salmon fishery up in Alaska needs to really consider changing their ways or stop for a period of time. Those fish that they're catching are summer feeding stock for the southern resident killer whales that start their journey in the Fraser River. They're called the 5-2 fish. They spend the first 2 years of their life in the Fraser River. That's a whole nother conversation. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole in terms of the health and the vitality of the Fraser River. When they make it out into the ocean, they spend 5 years going from there all the way up to Alaska, down the other coast of Vancouver Island, and back to the Fraser River again. That's an amazing creature. I mean, if you think about what fish has to endure for 7 years to successfully get back to do what they were designed to do, to spawn and procreate and provide nutrients to that ecosystem where they're decomposing, it's phenomenal. Farm fish need to go on land or just disappear. I'm not anti-farm fish. It's a business. I get it. But on land where it can be contained and controlled is where it needs to live or just disappear. There's all sorts of negative things there. Alexandra Morton can speak more intelligently to that. And then there's the rivers in the winter feeding stock grounds. So the Snake River and the Columbia River. There's dam systems there. There's ineffective spawning access for Chinook salmon historically. So that population has definitely depleted to low enough levels where it's applying pressure on that community of whales. And herring. Herring are a keystone species. They're often referred to as the big little fish because that's exactly what they are. They are little, but their purpose is greater than the sum of their size, and they feed everything. And so the commercial herring fishery, there's opportunity there to do something better. Having said all that, in 28 years, I can say that things look really good and stable and are improving. And I can make that comment because of the increase of humpback whales that we're seeing. What an incredible story. We've gone from 0 humpback whales in 1997 to well over 1,100 photo identified in just off the Victoria area here between Seattle, Victoria, and Vancouver. That is incredible. And when you have a 45 to 50 ton city bus with flippers eating, over a ton plus of food a day and then pooping, it trickles down to the bottom of the ocean. It feeds the phytoplankton and the zooplankton. You have this incredible fertilization cycle that is occurring, which was almost non-existent back in the mid-60s because the commercial whaling industry was just hammering these magnificent creatures and all species. Blue whales, fin whales, sei whales, sperm whales, right whales, humpback whales, minke whales, gray whales. They were all killed. And so now we have this resurgence of this magnificent animal, and they're doing what they're needing to do. They're fertilizing the coast. So we're seeing more bird activity. We're seeing more bait ball activity. We're seeing a lot of krill. The forage fish is incredible. And so that's just really positive to see. So I don't want people to take away a negative Nancy attitude from what I'm sharing, because I'm seeing a lot of positivity. Like, it's incredible, the growth that we're seeing. just need to help the southern resident killer whales somehow. Somebody's got to step up with some money, some resources, and some political will to kind of just drive that needle forward.
But that sounds like it's a multi-partnership approach, and it's not germane to British Columbia, because you said that involves the Alaska fishery, but it also involves Washington State and Oregon and perhaps California as well. Everybody's got to be willing to work together to resolve that issue, because the southern killer whales are not germane to British Columbia. They are transient.
They are. And wouldn't it be lovely if, like the wildlife who knows no borders, we could actually come together and dissolve that border and just have healthy dialogue and conversations and bring the expertise to the table to actually find some solutions. Because at the end of the day, again, we know what those solutions are. We do. It's been available for a long time. It's just a matter of pulling in the resources and finding a way to make it happen. And I come back to my original comment of, there's a lot of user groups that we may not like one another, or we may not have the same sentiment about certain subjects, but we all love whales.
Mm-hmm.
Can we not harness that energy somehow and just figure it out?
Do we need more hatchery fish? I think there are limitations.
Fish?
And certainly that would help, I know, in the sport fishing context of having tagged hatchery fish that could either be caught for food or for release. But do we need more?
Fish, again, is a complex conversation. But what I will say is the reason why we need hatchery fish, well, the reason why we have fish in the water, salmon in the water right now, is because of the sport fishing sector and industry. They are the ultimate in conservationists. They support hatcheries with labor, with investment. So kudos to them. I'm going to raise my hands up to that particular industry, because they are not the problem. They are part of the solution. Longer term, yes, we still need hatchery fish. Do we need more? Yes. In certain river systems, we could probably produce more hatchery fish. But this needs to be done in parallel with a more holistic approach of addressing the challenges, the rivers that have issue, address the habitat, layer in the hatchery fish, and then the fish will find a way to come back. Great story, Elwha River on the Olympic Peninsula, and there was a dam put up. It was a Chinook-bearing river ecosystem. The Chinook stopped coming, the dam went up. It killed the Chinook off in that river. They pulled the dam down, and the very next year, wild Chinook returned to that river. So for me, that story, that message is, if you give the fish the healthy habitat, they will find a way to make their way there, because millions of years of evolution have programmed them in their DNA to find a way to get back there. And so I'm a real believer that habitat is an absolute massive key component to the success of the salmon story on the coast of BC.
We're almost out of time, but another question that I've been thinking about is regulation for the whale watching sector. Government, as you alluded to, seems to be layering that on every year for one reason or another. Your viewing distances are restricted. There are limitations on how close you can get to whales, and some of that is justified, and perhaps some not. And I think about the proposals to restrict whale watching companies who know these species better than anybody, to restrict the watching to 500 yards or 500 meters, which to me is not even worth it. You can't see anything at that distance. What is the proper distance? What are the challenges that you face now from a regulatory perspective that makes it really hard for whale watching companies to operate, especially when you're welcoming guests from around the world that want a kind of experience that they can't get elsewhere?
Yeah. Well, watching any whale species over 200 meters is not sustainable. The industry will fracture. in my opinion. So currently, we have regulations on the Canadian side. We have regulations on the American side. So everything is in yards in the US, everything is in meters in Canada. So when we are in the presence of any whale species other than a Biggs orca or a mammal eating orca, we have to watch marine mammal orca at 200 meters. We have that permission because we sign an interim order agreement with Transport Canada that is a commitment for us to not actively seek out southern resident killer whales. So therefore giving us permission to watch the bigs at 200. Any other whale species is 100 meters, but there are exceptions. For example, if you come across a mother humpback whale and a calf, that then pushes to 200 meters. And then, of course, by extension, you just flop that on the US side and everything turns into yards, which is a different calculation altogether if you translate that to meters. So things have definitely changed quite a bit over the last 20 plus years. Currently, we are looking at a public comment period coming up here in terms of more regulations potentially in Canada. There's going to be a process here over the fall where the public will have opportunity to provide their input on that, which of course I would encourage and welcome. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to preserve what we feel we do very well in a sustainable manner with a very, very, very minimal impact to any of the animals that we have the pleasure of seeing at 200 meters and 100 meters respectively. If we push that to 400 meters to 1,000 or 1,000 meters, which there are certain things that I'm hearing through my channels and grapevine of contacts, that would be not positive. Not positive for us, but by extension, not positive for the whales. And I'd like to qualify that statement. So a lot of us in this industry are doing very well from a business side, but we are certainly giving back to community. So at Eagleing Tours, we feel strongly that we are a conservation company who happens to do whale watching. Our frame of mind is just a little bit different. And what that allows us to do is we work tirelessly at generating partnerships in community, supporting projects that we feel are meaningfully giving back and making the place better. For me, sustainability is 10 years ago. To sustain something, it is no longer acceptable. To give back, to make healthier, to regenerate is where things are at. So we really are working hard at fine-tuning and crafting a nature-positive strategy for the operation, and hopefully by extension that will stimulate an industry to think a bit more, just think differently and more holistically about their operation and what the impact is. At the end of the day, we feel strongly that because Eagle Wing Tours exists, our place is healthier. And that's where we stand.
And I think a lot of whale watching companies in both BC and Washington are adopting a very similar strategy because, let's face it, they need a healthy, regenerative, sustainable marine environment to carry on business, or nobody's going to take whale watching tours, which is really, truly one of the iconic experiences in British Columbia. One final question, Brett. What's next for Eagle Wing?
Oh gosh, the big question. We are just continuing to drive forward. I'm a believer that complacency is a killer in a very competitive industry we call whale watching. And so we have a deep team, passionate, very knowledgeable, a lot of expertise, and we are tapping into that on our team. We're tapping into our partnerships more heavily. And yeah, there's some good things that are going to be coming out in the new year. We're coming up with a new strategy, where our commitment to net zero emissions and a nature positive strategy is going to allow us to openly report in a transparent manner about what we do and the positive impact that we have on the environment and our community at large. In addition to what we already do really well on the water and providing that intimate engagement, storytelling, educational experience on the water for people from all over the world that want to come to Victoria and get excited about a barnacle and a humpback whale.
Sounds very exciting. I look forward to hearing all about it. Thanks for this, Brett.
Yeah, my pleasure, Walt. Thank you very much. And thank you to all those passionate whale people out there online. Thank you for being here.
That's Brett Soberg, co-owner and head captain of Eagle Wing Whale Watching and Wildlife Tours. Thanks for joining me on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast. And thank you for listening. Please share this episode with your professional colleagues and decision makers to help with our advocacy efforts as we seek to build a vibrant, sustainable, and resilient tourism and hospitality industry in British Columbia. Visit our website at tiabc.ca, sign up for our newsletter, become a member of TIABC, or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to find out more about our next Voice of Tourism podcast. If you have a tourism policy issue within BC that needs attention, please send me a note at wjudas@tiabc.ca. This is Walt Judas bidding you farewell until next time.